Welcome to our community church, Unitarian Universalists. I am your worship associate, Jim O'Neill, and it's a joy to be with you today, both in person and virtually. For our visitors, let me introduce Community Church. We are an open-minded, progressive, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Please look to your weekly email for announcements. And if you don't receive our email announcements, please contact our office and we'd be glad to add you to our mailing list. We're delighted to welcome back to our pulpit today a minister that needs really no introduction for most of us. Reverend Jacqueline Luck is an ordained minister of Unitarian Universalist, and a member for years of our community and very dedicated to the work. She will be presenting today on a vocabulary of faith for religious liberals. I'm looking forward to hearing her. We begin our worship in earnest with our chalice lighting. It is our custom to light a chalice invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship. Please join us in singing We Light This Flame. It's on your program. Light this flame to affirm the light of truth and knowledge, warmth of love and community, and the fire of hope and commitment. And today, despite what your program says, it's Reverend Jacqueline Luck that will bring us the word for all ages.
And it feels a bit weird since we have no children here. However, we might have children online. And so I do have a children's story, but it is based on our Unitarian history. So I shall begin. Isabella wanted to be a wise and good queen and to help all of her people. She was married to Princess Isabella of Poland, and she became Queen Isabella of Hungary. She married King John of Hungary, and they had a baby. The king fought with other kings. The nobles fought with each other. This group of people fought with that group of people, and those people fought with these. Everywhere, people complained about taxes. They argued about religion, and they fought about land. Sometimes they fought about simply getting enough to eat. They fought, and they fought, and they fought, and many people died. Isabella's husband was away fighting when their baby was born. "Come home," she wrote him, "come home and see our son." But sadly, King John of Hungary became sick and died when their baby was only 2 weeks old. He never saw his son. The nobles elected the baby prince as their new king and cried, "All hail, King John Sigismund of Hungary." But young John was much too young to rule a country torn by war. Other kings from other countries took most of Hungary away from King John and kept it for themselves. Isabella and young John ended up living in a small eastern corner of the kingdom, a place beyond the forest, a grassy plain surrounded by high mountains and watered by streams, a land called Transylvania. And there, in the only corner of the kingdom that was left to them, Isabella lived with her son John and with her mother's friend, Dr. Biandretta. As John grew, Isabella and Dr. Biandretta taught him, as Isabella's parents had taught her, to be a good and wise ruler over all people in the land. But the wars didn't stop while John was growing up. The people were still fighting, sometimes with other countries, sometimes with each other. They still complained about taxes, and they still argued about religion. Different people followed different religion in Transylvania, and none of them seemed to get along. The Catholics were arguing with the Lutherans. The Lutherans were arguing with the Greek Orthodox. The Greek Orthodox were arguing with the Calvinists. The Calvinists were arguing with the Catholics. And it just went on and on and on. In 1557, Queen Isabella issued a new law in the name of her son, the king. The law said that people could talk about and discuss religion, but they could not argue and certainly not fight about religion anymore. We could use a law like that, although I imagine it's pretty unenforceable. 2 years later, Isabella died. John, King Sigismund of Hungary, was 19. Now he had to rule by himself. He wanted to be a wise and good king also, to help the people. "What should we do?" young John asked one of his advisors, an old gray-bearded one with a cane. "How can we stop the fighting?" "One king, one country," the advisor declared, stomping his cane on the ground. You see, at that time, whomever was the king, the ruler of a country, they declared the religion. So that's why we're more familiar with in England, but like Queen Mary came in, she declared Catholicism after they'd had a lot of freedom the other way. So the ruler declared the religion. So this guy's saying, one country, one king, one religion. King John didn't think that would work, but something obviously had to be done. Talking was better than arguing. And so, as his mother and Dr. Biandretta had suggested, King John invited preachers from different religions to come to his court and talk about religion, and they came. Dr. Biandretta invited his friend Francis David, and he came. The preachers talked and talked and talked, and sometimes they gave up talking to argue with each other, and sometimes they argued so much that King John was afraid they would give up arguing to start fighting, but they did not. The talks went on day after day, and no one was hurt. One man talked very well, and he convinced people in every discussion that he had. That man was Francis David, Dr. Biandretta's friend. Nowadays, we would call Francis David's religion Unitarianism. He declared himself to be a Unitarian minister, and we often claim him to be the first Unitarian minister, Francis David. He declared himself Unitarianism because he said that God was one being instead of three, not Trinitarian. He was a God of unity, not a Trinity. King John decided he liked Francis David, and he liked the religion too. He decided to become a Unitarian. And the year 1569, he did. One king, one religion, one king, one country, one religion, the old noble had said. We need not think alike to love alike, Francis David said, and King John agreed. He wanted to be a good and wise ruler over all the people. At a meeting in the town of Torda, he issued the Edict of Torda, a special law, and this said that no one shall be reviled for their religion by anyone. And he allowed the people of Transylvania to choose the religion they thought was best for them. On the 14th of January, 1571, King John Sigismund, the first and only Unitarian king in history, declared that Unitarianism was one of the official religions of his realm in Transylvania, and that people could worship as they chose. And even today, in that place beyond the forest called Transylvania, which is now part of the country of Romania, there are Unitarian churches, the oldest Unitarian churches in the world. Unitarians have lived there for over 400 years, and Unitarians live there still. And in fact, I'm on Facebook with one of the Unitarian ministers in Hungary, and she and her congregation are very busy trying to do outreach to the refugees from the war in Ukraine. They're right there. And at one time, they were under Soviet rule, so they want to be ardent in that. So we have a history to be proud of attempting to find a language that we can all talk and be accepting of each other. And that is what I'm going to talk about today. Thank you.
We turn to hymn 114, Forward Through the Ages.
Our first reading today is by Kathleen Norris, entitled Amazing Grace, a Vocabulary of Faith. I find it sad to consider that belief has become a scary word, because at its Greek root, to believe simply means to give one's heart to. Thus, if we can determine what it is we give our heart to, then we will know what it is we believe. But the word belief has been impoverished. It has come to mean head over heart, intellectual assent. When people say, "What do you believe?" they're usually asking, "What do you think?" I've come to see that my education, even my religious education, left me with a faulty and inadequate sense of religious belief as a kind of suspension of the intellect. Religion, as I came to understand it, was a primitive relic that could not stand up to the advances made in our understanding of human psychological development or the inquiry of higher mathematics or the modern sciences. I had thought that my doubts were spectacular obstacles to my faith, and was confused but intrigued when an old monk blithely stated that doubt is merely the seed of faith, a sign that faith is alive and ready to grow. I began to appreciate religious belief as a relationship, like a deep friendship or a marriage, something I could plunge into, not knowing exactly what I was doing or what would be demanded of me in the long run. Perhaps my most important breakthrough with regard to belief came when I learned to be as consciously skeptical and questioning of my disbelief and my doubts as I was of my burgeoning faith. The relentlessly cheerful and positive language about faith that I associated with the strong-arm tactics of evangelism fails to take this biblical ambiguity into account. I appreciate much more the wisdom of novelist Doris Betts' assertion that faith is not synonymous with certainty, but is the decision to keep your eyes open. And later, Norris writes, "My new understanding of faith as like energy itself, fluid, always in motion, but never constant, has been instructed by the Bible, the Christian theological tradition, and my own experience. Faith as a constant, always there, but surging and ebbing, sometimes strongly evident, and other times barely discernible on my spiritual landscape." End of the reading. Community Church, Unitarian Universalists, is a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends generously help us do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online at ccuunola.org/stewardship or by text 504-370-2659. That's 370-2659, text give. Of course, you can also send a check to CCUU at 6690 Fleur-de-Lis Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70124. Thank you for supporting Community Church. For those of you here in the congregation today, you may come forward to leave your donation or raise your hand and we can come to you. Now is our sacred time for joys and sorrows. After our musical interlude, you may come forward to share those joys or sorrows, or if you prefer, you may fill out a card which our ushers can make available to you. Or if you are online, we welcome you to submit your joys and sorrows in the chat.
We would turn to hymn 23, Bring Many Names.
a sorrow that Congress is resisting restoring the ban on assault weapons, and a sadness that the gun violence epidemic rages on. A joy that at our recent meeting we have elected a new slate of board members who are dedicated to the service and growth of this community. And now we light an additional candle each for the joys that are bubbling within but have not found expression, and the sorrows that are stirring within but we haven't found words for. And there is an additional, Howard, please come forward. Sure.
So I do have a deep sorrow, and I'm leaving within the week. After 34 years of living in New Orleans and all the friends that I've made in this city, and I will get over the sorrow when I meet my daughter in Dallas. She's flying into Dallas so that she will accompany me during actually Father's Day next week. So the joy is that I will be with family and I will get to know my grandchildren in Seattle. So I want to thank you all for your support.
Can I express for us our sadness at losing such a wonderful member of our community who made so many contributions. Bless you on your journey. We also have from Vera a prayer for energy and commitment as the proceedings and addressing of the January 6th insurrection, for the courage of all those involved. And now our second reading on vocabulary for religious liberals by David Bombaugh, a humanist, universalist, and a UU minister, as well as former professor at Meade Lombard Seminary. He says that he finds humanists are increasingly involved in a monologue because of a vocabulary inadequate to engage other people of faith. We have lost the ability to speak of that which is sacred, holy, of ultimate importance to us, the language that would allow us to enter into critical dialogue with the religious community. The end of the second reading.
He was speaking to me about my internship at the Church of the River in Memphis some years ago. There's a large gathering of representative congregations in Memphis interested in justice work, organized much like Together New Orleans. He asked what the most difficult thing for me to do in my internship. I trusted him. He was a friend of my intern minister. And so I answered, praying out loud. As we settled in our chairs to open the meeting, I could not believe my ears when I heard announced Jacqueline Luck, the intern minister at the UU congregation, will lead us all in prayer. I fought to get my breath, and who knows what I said. Burton Carley, my intern minister, whispered later in my ear, "You did fine. You only forgot one 3-letter word." I turned to him with questioning eyes, and he said, "God." God, I forgot to say God. I don't think I was really prepared to say it, but here I was with a bunch of people that had a deep belief in the holy in their lives. But anyway, he said they probably heard it anyway. They're so used to hearing prayers, so I felt a little relieved. This was all brought to mind this week as I listened to the recorded Q&A between 4 candidates for the trustee position on the UUA board, when one said, "If we are going to work with other faiths for justice, we are going to have to be able to talk with them." That's the genesis of this sermon. There will be no vocabulary test today, and I am going to throw out a lot of terms. And if you would like, you can email worship@ccunola.org, and I'll be happy to send you either the sermon or a list of my references. I do hope, though, to add clarity to our dialogues with this sermon on vocabulary that is specifically aimed toward Unitarian Universalists. There is a universal language of faith. We need to learn to not let our buttons be pushed when others are speaking sincerely of their faith, as you might hear it Together New Orleans and other places. Heck, you might even be asked to lead a prayer, and you can do it. You can do it by expressing gratitude for all the people that have left their homes and the comfort of home to join us all together for this, serve this common mission. And you could begin with Our Father, which is very embracing, and it might be helpful. A Methodist minister taught me to close with these words, "In the name of the good and the true and the holy, Amen," which is a lot different from what our Christian brothers and sisters might say. And you know that Amen means, "May it be so." So that's all you're saying there. It's not anything radical, radically different from what we believe. Many of us left a church beginning our journey to Unitarian Universalist faith, and we believed that theological vocabulary should stay behind as well. Or we'd just be religious liberals with a fundamentalist religious vocabulary. Talk about uncomfortable and ineffective. But of course, it's not the words we use that are at fault. It's their context, how they were used. As Kathleen Norris says, she finds it sad that belief has become a scary word. In truth, Norris tells us that to believe at its Greek root simply means to give one's heart to. We certainly give our hearts to. We certainly give our hearts to our Unitarian Universalist faith and its, or tradition, if you want to say. Seldom do words have one definition. Often their definition is determined by their context. Is it read or read? Depends on its use in the sentence. Also, words are used differently according to their more popular definition over time. Seldom is gay used in its older meaning of mirthful or happy anymore. All to say, and I mention that because it is Pride Month, all to say words mean different things at different times. It is highly unusual for a word to have only one meaning or one use. They evolve. However, sometimes we seem to hold on to the first learned definition as the definitive understanding, unless we are encouraged to think more broadly, like through a vocabulary test or by a sermon. A poem from Tom Barrett. If I say the word God, people run away. They've been frightened, sat on till the spirit cried uncle. Now they play hide and seek with something they can't name. They know it's out there looking for them. They want to be found, but there is all this stuff in the way. I can't talk about God and make any sense, and I can't not talk about God and make any sense. So we talk about the weather, and we are talking about God. The talking about the weather can be a way of talking about God. I have a Westminster's Dictionary of Theological Terms to broaden my understanding for other possibilities. And I often find myself searching other books for terminology and definitions that are more useful for religious liberals. Yes, there are such books. One is A Heretic's Faith, Vocabulary for Religious Liberals by Frederick Muir. Another is Jack Mendelssohn's Being Liberal in an Illiberal Age, as well as other books written by UUs that help us clarify religious terms and our relationship to them as religious liberals. For instance, worship is an important religious word. Someone actually asked me in Mississippi if I meant prostrating myself before a deity when I spoke of worship from the pulpit. Shocked, I did manage to answer, well, if that's how you give worth to things, then maybe so. But that is not how I worship. The root word of worship means to honor. To honor. And so when we worship, we give worth to, we honor. Worship services in Unitarian Universalist churches are a time of giving worth to what is good, true, and holy in our lives, including values of beauty and compassion, justice, truth, love, ethics, and integrity. I want to mention friendship when Howard. And we give worth to the growing of our inner selves, inner spiritual selves, and invoking the indefinable and ineffable. Perhaps you've heard someone accusing Unitarian Universalists of worshiping the coffee urn or the flaming question mark. There used to be a lot of these big red question marks on T-shirts and things with flames coming up from them. Since we love to question so much, the point was we worship the question, which we honor the question, that's for sure. I answer jibes about our belief with the observation that belief is so important to Unitarian Universalists that we dare to step outside of accepted belief and quite often suffer consequences because of our beliefs. You heard our guest speakers several Sundays ago mention that UUs had dared to shake up Christianity. I thought it was nice she recognized our courage and devotion. Unitarian Universalist theologies were both declared heresies by the early Roman Church because they were outside of the accepted church theology. A heretic is simply one who chooses, in this case, chooses outside of the doctrine. You and I are heretics, in the best meaning of the word. Modern-day Unitarian Universalists choose what we give worth to and how we will worship with our lives. Faith with reason has been a motto for years. There's also a biblical concept of faith that includes behavior or works. That concept speaks to religious liberals who understand faith as a manner or a way of living out our beliefs in this world. Unitarian Universalists have long been understood as religious liberals, as I've mentioned, not necessarily political liberal. We do have politically conservative members. From my dictionary of theological terms, liberal theology is a theological movement stemming from Schleiermacher. I love to say that word, Schleiermacher, in 1768, 1834, who sought to reformulate Christian doctrine in contemporary terms. What? Christian doctrine can be reformulated in contemporary terms? That would be news to a lot of folks, wouldn't it? And it happened in 1800s, and it happens all the time. Schleiermacher's liberal theology emphasized the use of reason, of science, of freedom, and the connection between the divine and human experience, while focusing on human goodness and progress, as opposed to Calvinism. In much the same way, Unitarian Frederick Muir describes liberalism as a way of walking and acting in the world, celebrating and practicing the importance of persons, their inherent freedom to think and speak and associate, hear, read, see, and learn. I've come to consider that the emphasis by liberal religion on individuals needs clarification. Individuals are certainly important, and we are a gathered community. We are communities of individuals. That's something different from individualism, which can lead to self-importance and intolerance. Christianity, and certainly not liberal religion, has ever been set in stone, regardless of what you've been led to believe. But who is the God of a religious liberal? Briefly, God is that which is ultimate in our lives. The God of many understanding, many names. I so appreciate Nicholas's including those hymns today because I wanted to push this forward, reaffirm it. God of many names, the ultimate has many names, many descriptions. To each of us, something different perhaps. God is the vital, creative process and force beneath and all. Let me just start over. God is the vital, creative process and force beneath and within all things. That's what Unitarian Jack Mendelson wrote. UU Forest Church writes, God is not God's name. God is my name for the mystery that looms within and arches beyond the limits of my being. And as well before my colleagues wrote of their God, Spinoza wrote, God is the universe and all that is. Reverend Burton Carley wrote, God is eternal possibility, which is a way of saying that life is never done with what it has to teach us, and that when one door closes, other doors open, even if we're unaware of them. None of these definitions of God is anthropomorphic. Though Bill Sinkford, a president of our Association of Congregations, wrote about finding loving hands as he sat in the hospital with his teenage son in a coma from a drug overdose. His words, "And late in the evening, I felt the hands of a loving universe reaching out to hold me. The hands of God, the Spirit of life." The name was unimportant. I knew those hands would be there to hold me whatever the morning brought. And I knew, though I cannot tell you how, those hands were holding my son as well. And I knew I did not have to walk that path alone. Bill Sinkford, up until this time, was a declared humanist. And I would say now he would amend that to, or hyphenate that to maybe a humanist, spiritual, Unitarian Universalist. Or as much as we can love to sing Amazing Grace, which I think we all do, most of us do, we puzzle, I do, what in the world could grace mean in a liberal religion? Reverend Carley often said, grace is the good, grace is equal to the good we seek and we find each day. We find the grace each day. It's there. We find that goodness, perhaps in right relation with the universe and with each other. Right relationship means not doing unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Writes Muir, the golden rule of Christianity describes right relationship. Mendelssohn adds that beyond tolerance, right relationship seeks a pluralistic community. Right relation is about bringing others, creatures, Mother Earth, people in foreign lands, into us, into our circle of care, into our circle of respect and radical love. Our religion asks a lot of us. In that hymn we just sang, well, I closed it, I didn't mean to. That last verse might have touched some of your buttons. It was all about following God's lead or whatever. So here's what I want to say about that. Let us think that goal, God's goal, our ultimate goal for all of us, is beloved community. Beloved community. That's a phrase used by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He chose to use that over the Christian metaphor of Paul's describing Christ, the body. Dr. Martin Luther King chose to use beloved community over the Christian metaphor of the body of Christ being the church. We strive to be a beloved community. Our community church, UU, is a beloved community. That's why we're covenantal. We agree how we will be with each other. Together, New Orleans seeks beloved community of right relations among the faithful of New Orleans. Together, New Orleans seeks right beloved community. And lastly, spirituality refers to an inner dimension, a depth dimension of every person. Perhaps you feel it when you listen to beautiful music, or you're in the presence of love, your grandchildren. There is this inner dimension, a depth of every person that is solidly there, that is so much more than our surface day-to-day living. Every religious tradition has some facet that speaks to this spiritual side of our humaneness, no. How do you plural that? Of our humanness. We often confuse religion and spirituality. However, religion's root word is religio, meaning to bind together. Spirituality is an inner dimension. Religio is binding together. In closing, we gather to give worth to what is ultimate in our lives and to honor what is asked of us as people of faith, as religious liberals. We gather to support one another in our spiritual growth and work to create beloved community here on earth. And we are heretics in the best sense of the word, who have faith with reason. Unitarian Universalism is a religious tradition of binding oneself to others through respect and sensitivity toward the sacredness of all. We are a liberal religious people, whether we give our hearts to earth-centered practices, or we are theist, or we are atheist, humanist, Buddhist, Hindu, or Christian. We are religious liberals. We give our hearts to our belief. We live our faith. I hope you will be more confident entering conversations within the larger religious community, and perhaps this will help you kind of sort some of those muddled understandings in your mind as well, so that we can take our rightful place at the table as religious liberals. Blessed be. So be it. Benediction I have for you is from this little book I've just bought that's really wonderful. Unitarian Universalist Pocket Guide. You know, every year they update it, and this one's really nice. It has a whole section on the history. It's really effective. So if you're newer, this would be a good book you might like to find. Pocket Guide, Unitarian Universalist. Much of our ministry is a benediction, a speaking well of each other and the world, a speaking well of what we value, a speaking well of our efforts, a speaking well of our dreams. This is how we celebrate life, through speaking well of it, living the benediction, and becoming, as a word, well spoken. Amen. Go in peace, my friends.
For our closing hymn, please turn to 318, We Would Be One.
I like to stand if you would like to, please.
As we end our service and extinguish this flame, we carry the flame of justice and love in our hearts and in our actions until we meet again.